Honora Bellamy had been a duchess for less than 7 hours when she discovered that her father had lied to her. She stood alone in the Duke of Redwick's private chamber, one hand pressed against the polished edge of his writing desk, the other holding a packet she had been forbidden to open. The wedding was over. The guests had departed. The last carriage wheels had faded beyond the courtyard. Her maid had removed the pearls from Honora's hair and left her in a pale silk evening gown, more suitable for a bride awaiting her husband than a woman preparing to betray him. Yet betrayal was exactly why she had come. Her father's words had followed her all the way from Bellamy House. Before midnight, place the papers inside his dispatch case. Do not read them. Do not hesitate. Edmund has waited 7 years for justice. Edmund. Her brother's name had made obedience easy. Until now. Honora looked toward the tall case beside Gideon Ashcombe's desk. The brass lock was already open, almost as if someone expected her. That should have frightened her. Instead, what frightened her was the packet in her hands. She had been told it contained proof. Proof that Gideon had betrayed men under his command. Proof that he had hidden political dealings after returning from war. Proof that the Duke of Redwick deserved the disgrace her father intended to bring upon him. But something in her father's insistence, do not read them, had followed Honora into the room like a second shadow. She broke the seal. The first page made her breath stop. There was no evidence. There were letters, forged letters. One appeared to be written in Gideon's hand to a known political agitator in Manchester. Another suggested payments had been made through intermediaries. A third contained language so reckless that no man holding one of England's oldest dukedoms would have written it, unless he wished to place a rope around his own neck. Honora stared at the papers. Her father had not sent her to expose a guilty man. He had sent her to manufacture one. What have you asked me to do? Something he knew you would regret after it was too late. Honora spun around. Gideon Ashcombe stood in the doorway. He had removed the formal coat he wore at the wedding breakfast, but little else about him looked softened by the hour. Tall, still, black waistcoat, white linen. Dark hair combed back from a face that society had once called handsome and now more often called severe. His expression did not contain outrage. That was worse. Honora clutched the forged letters. How long have you been standing there? Long enough. She waited for him to summon servants. He did not. Put them on the desk. Honora remained where she was. Your Grace. Put them down. His voice barely rose. She obeyed. Gideon crossed the room, picked up the first letter, and read only 3 lines before giving a humorless breath through his nose. Poor imitation. Honora stared. You know what it is? I know who wrote it. He turned the page. Elias Meriton, former copying clerk. Excellent with parliamentary hands. Less convincing with military correspondence. Honora's face went cold. How could you possibly know that? Gideon laid the paper down. Your father's courier left Bellamy House 3 nights ago. She said nothing. He changed horses at Stretton, took supper at Coventry, slept 4 hours, reached Redwick Land yesterday afternoon. Honora felt something inside her chest tighten. You were watching him? I was watching your father. For how long? Gideon met her eyes. Years. The room suddenly felt smaller. Honora looked toward the door. He noticed. You may leave if you wish. She did not move. Something about that unsettled her more than being locked in. Were you watching me as well? She asked. Everyone watches the weapon. His gaze lowered briefly to the forged papers. Sensible men watch the hand holding it. Anger displaced fear. I am not my father's weapon. No? Gideon looked at her wedding ring. Honora hated how quickly her eyes followed his. He had made his point without saying another word. She lifted her chin. My father told me these papers would prove what you had done. And yet you opened them. Because I wanted to know the truth. No, you opened them because some part of you already suspected he was lying. The words struck harder than she expected. Honora turned away. You speak as though you know my family. I know enough. How? Gideon did not answer immediately. Instead, he walked toward the fire and rested one hand against the mantel. Your father has sent 3 people into my affairs before you. Honora looked back. A secretary, a household clerk, and one officer who believed I had forgotten his gambling debts. What happened to them? Gideon's expression did not change. Your father no longer employs any of them. The answer was too careful. What did you do? Nothing tonight requires that answer. The rumors returned to her then. Men forced from clubs. A magistrate who resigned without explanation. A former officer who left England after a private meeting with Redwick. People called Gideon Ashcombe many things. Cold, vindictive, dangerous. Some called him the Iron Duke. Others used darker language. Honora had dismissed half of it as aristocratic exaggeration. Now she was less certain. Gideon returned to the desk. You will write to your father. Honora stared at him. No. You will tell him the documents are inside my dispatch case. No. He expects confirmation. Then let him expect it. Gideon's eyes hardened. If he believes you failed, he changes the plan. And? If he believes he succeeded, he sends someone to retrieve them. Honora understood. You want me to lie to him. I want him comfortable. You expect me to help you trap my own father. Gideon stepped closer. Your father expected you to help him destroy your husband before your wedding night had properly begun. That silenced her. He placed a sheet of paper before her. Write. Honora looked at the chair. Then at him. Then she sat. Her hand shook only once. She wrote 6 lines. The papers are placed where you instructed. Nothing has been discovered. I will send word if anything changes. Gideon took the page. You forgot something. What? Tell him I trust you. Honora's head snapped up. He almost smiled. Almost. Why? Because that is what he most wants to believe. She added the sentence. Gideon sealed the letter himself. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Honora said the name that had brought her into his house. Edmund. Gideon stopped. It was the first time she had seen his composure shift. Only slightly. But enough. My brother died under your command. Gideon turned. My father said you abandoned his position during the retreat. Silence. He said Edmund asked for reinforcements and you refused. Gideon's expression became unreadable. Is that what Bellamy told you? It is what happened. No. The answer was immediate. Honora stepped toward him. Then what happened? Gideon looked at her for so long that anger began replacing everything else. Finally he said, that is what survived. He left the room before she could stop him. By 10 the next morning, Honora had learned something else about her husband. He did not need private chambers or threatening silences to frighten people. He could do it in daylight. She entered the estate office while Gideon was meeting 2 tenant representatives and Mr. Vale, his land steward. Maps covered the table. The dispute concerned several acres of common grazing land near Bracken Moor. Vale wanted the traditional access closed. These arrangements cannot continue merely because they are old, Gideon said. One of the tenants clenched his hat. My father grazed cattle there, Your Grace. His father before him. Custom is not title. Honora watched the man's jaw tighten. Vale pushed a ledger forward. The estate loses nearly £300 annually through unmanaged use. Gideon nodded once. Then, close access at Michaelmas. Honora spoke before she intended to. That figure is wrong. Every man turned. Gideon's eyes narrowed. Honora stepped closer to the table. She had seen the estate summary the previous evening while searching for his dispatch case. The Woodland account lists grazing damage separately. Mr. Vale has included the same loss twice. Vale flushed. Your Grace, the Duchess misunderstands. No. Honora pointed. Here. And again here. Gideon took the ledger. He read both entries. No one moved. Finally he closed the book. Michaelmas is postponed. Vale went pale. We will review every figure before any order is issued. Honora expected gratitude. Gideon gave her none. He simply looked at her. But something had changed. He had listened. That mattered more. Before she could decide what the look meant, a servant appeared in the doorway. Your Grace. Gideon glanced over. Lord Bellamy has arrived. Honora's blood went cold. My father? The servant bowed. His carriage entered the courtyard moments ago. Gideon looked at Honora. He came quickly. She understood the rest without hearing it. He had come to watch the trap close. Luncheon was unbearable. Lord Alistair Bellamy sat across from his daughter, with the calm confidence of a man who believed everything was proceeding according to plan. He asked after the journey, complimented Redwick, praised Gideon's hospitality. No one mentioned the letter Honora had sent. No one mentioned the forged papers. Then Gideon changed the subject. Did you know Colonel Harcourt has returned to England? Lord Bellamy's hand stopped above his wineglass. Only for a second. Honora saw it. Gideon saw her see it. Her father set the glass down. I had not heard. He served with Edmund. So did many men. Not in the final month. The silence at the table sharpened. Lord Bellamy looked at Gideon. I was under the impression my son's service had no relevance to luncheon. Gideon leaned back. Perhaps not. Honora looked from one man to the other. Her father changed the subject. Too quickly. For the first time in 7 years, Honora wondered whether Edmund's name frightened him. That evening she entered Gideon's library alone. She told herself she wanted a book. She did not. She wanted answers. One drawer in the writing table resisted. The next opened. Inside lay a military compass. Honora froze. She picked it up. EB. The initials were scratched deeply into the silver casing. She knew the mark near the hinge. Edmund had dropped it from a horse when they were children. Her family had been told his effects were lost abroad. Put it down. Gideon stood behind her. Honora turned, gripping the compass. This was Edmund's. Yes. You told us nothing was recovered. I told you nothing. My father said, your father says many things. How did you get it? Edmund gave it to me. She shook her head. No. He did. When? The week before he died. Honora's breath caught. Gideon watched her carefully. Did Bellamy ever tell you Edmund wrote to me before his last campaign? She could not speak. He had not. Gideon crossed the library and unlocked a narrow door Honora had assumed led to storage. Beyond it was a room lined with shelves. Ledgers, dispatch copies, military reports, letters tied in faded ribbon, 7 years of secrets. He pulled down a thick account book and opened it. These are government supply contracts. Honora frowned. Why do you have them? Because provisions paid for by the Crown never reached several units in 1811 and 1812. Food, medicine, horses. She looked at him. What does that have to do with Edmund? Gideon turned the ledger around. A company name had been written across the top of several pages. Below it were the names of private partners. Honora read the first, then the second, then the third. Her knees nearly weakened. Alistair Bellamy. Her father. No. Gideon said nothing. You forged this. No. You expect me to believe my father stole military supplies. I expect nothing from you. Honora stepped back. Edmund would have known. He did. The words landed like a blow. Gideon reached into another file and removed a single folded page. Read. Honora took it. She recognized the handwriting before she saw the signature. Edmund. Her hands began trembling. There were only a few surviving lines. If my father learns what I have discovered, Honora must never be drawn into it. Honora read the sentence twice, then a third time. Her throat closed. My father told me you killed him. Gideon's face hardened, but his voice remained low. You came here believing I buried your brother, Duchess. Honora looked up. For the first time that night, The man before her did not look like a duke. He looked like someone who had been carrying the same grave for 7 years. "I have spent every year since," Gideon said, trying to discover who did. And suddenly Honora no longer knew which man she had married, or which man had raised her. Honora read Edmund's sentence until the words lost their shape. "If my father learns what I have discovered, Honora must never be drawn into it." Her brother had written her name, not as part of some affectionate farewell, as a warning. For 7 years she had carried a clean version of his death inside her. Edmund had been honorable, Gideon had failed him, and her father had been the grieving man left to protect the family. Now one page had disturbed all 3 truths. Honora slowly lowered the letter. "How do I know this is real?" Gideon did not look offended. "That is the first sensible question you have asked me." She stiffened. "You mistake suspicion for stupidity." "No, I mistake loyalty for something much more dangerous." He took the letter from her and returned it to its file. "You should verify everything, even what you tell me?" "Especially that." Honora studied him. It was not the answer she expected. Gideon closed the cabinet. "If Bellamy lied to you once, do not replace his certainty with mine. And if you are lying, then find it." For the first time since entering Redwick, Honora understood that Gideon did not want obedience. He wanted proof. That should have comforted her. Instead, it made him more difficult to understand. Over the next several days, Honora began asking questions quietly. She wrote to 2 men whose names appeared in Edmund's old correspondence. She requested copies of estate records connected to the disputed common land. She sent for newspapers from the years immediately after the campaign, and she began noticing how often Gideon's name appeared beside some other man's ruin. A former magistrate resigned after private letters became public. A merchant lost a government contract after accusations of bribery surfaced. A member of parliament abandoned a promising career after a scandal involving a married woman reached exactly the right newspaper. The pattern disturbed her. One evening she entered Gideon's study carrying 3 letters. He was reading beside the fire. She dropped them on the desk. "You did this." Gideon looked down. "Which part?" "All of it." He read the first name. "Sir Malcolm Evers. You discovered he was connected to the missing military supplies." "Yes, but you could not prove it." "No. So you obtained proof of his adultery and threatened to expose him unless he resigned." Gideon said nothing. Honora's anger sharpened. "You punished him for one crime because you could not prove another." "He resigned. That is not an answer. It is the result." Honora stared at him. "And Lord Pembridge sold army horses to the government twice. You destroyed his son's engagement." "I informed the bride's father that Pembridge had concealed gambling liabilities and bribed a clerk. You knew what that would do to the family." "Yes." Honora's voice dropped. "The law protected them, so you became the law." Gideon looked at her across the desk. For a time, no denial, no apology. That frightened her more than excuses would have. "So the stories about you are true. Some. You ruined men. I ruined men who profited while soldiers went hungry. And everyone around them?" His jaw tightened. "That was collateral." Honora took a step back. There it was. Not rumor, not misunderstanding. The monster existed, not in shouting or violence, in the calm conviction that suffering could be measured and distributed. She whispered, "Edmund's death did not give you the right." "No." The answer surprised her. Gideon looked away. "But for years I behaved as though it did." That was the first time he admitted it. And Honora hated that the confession made him seem more human. The letter from Colonel Nathaniel Harcourt arrived 3 days later. He did not answer her questions. He wrote only, "I will come to Redwick. Do not inform Lord Bellamy." Harcourt arrived after dusk. He was lean, gray at the temples, and carried himself with the rigid caution of a man who expected old dangers to follow him through new doors. When Honora entered the drawing room, he stood, For a moment, he simply looked at her. Then his face changed. You have his eyes. Honora's throat tightened. Edmund's? Harcourt shook his head. No. A pause. Your father's. Your father's. The words chilled her. Gideon entered behind her. Harcourt's expression closed immediately. You brought him? This is his house. Then I have nothing to say. Gideon stopped near the door. You came because Lady Honora asked you. I came because Edmund once asked me to look after her if things went badly. Honora turned sharply. What things? Harcourt looked at Gideon, then at her. Your brother discovered irregularities months before his death. I know. No. You know what Redwick found afterward. Honora took a step closer. What did Edmund know? Harcourt hesitated. He knew enough to be frightened. Of my father. Harcourt's silence was answer enough. Then he said something worse. Edmund did not report what he found immediately. Honora frowned. What do you mean? He concealed part of it. Gideon's expression hardened. What part? Harcourt looked at him. That is precisely why I did not want you here. The room seemed to contract. Honora said, Colonel, tell me. Harcourt shook his head. Not tonight. You crossed half the country to tell me nothing. I crossed half the country to see whether you were still your father's daughter. Honora's face went cold. And? Harcourt looked at her for a long moment. I have not decided. He left before Gideon could stop him. The following morning, a letter arrived from Bellamy House. Honora recognized her father's seal. She almost refused to open it. Almost. The message was brief. Julian has been offered a place among men who may shape his future. That future depends upon the family remaining united. Then came the sentence that made her hand tighten. Choose carefully which brother you intend to betray. One is already buried. Honora carried the letter directly to the fire. Gideon entered as the paper curled black at the edges. He threatened Julian. Gideon did not ask how. He is becoming frightened. He is becoming my father. Gideon watched the paper burn. Those may be the same thing. She looked at him. You enjoy this. No. You have waited 7 years for him to lose control. I have waited 7 years for him to make a mistake. That is not much different. Gideon's gaze hardened. No. One is revenge. The other is evidence. Honora nearly laughed. You still pretend there is a clean line between them? He had no answer. The common land dispute returned 2 days later. This time, Honora asked to see every account before Gideon made a decision. Mr. Vale protested. Gideon allowed it. By evening, Honora found the deception. Vale owned a private interest in land bordering the proposed enclosure. If Redwick closed the common rights, the value of his own property would rise. Honora placed the documents before Gideon. He did not exaggerate the figures merely to please you. Gideon read the papers. He intended to profit. Yes. Gideon summoned Vale before dinner. He dismissed him within 10 minutes. No drama, no shouting, just a sentence. You will leave Redwick by noon tomorrow. Vale went white. Honora watched from the doorway. Afterward, she said, You did not destroy him. Gideon glanced at her. Should I have? No. Then perhaps you are improving me. I would not be so arrogant. For the first time, something almost like amusement touched his face. It vanished quickly, but Honora had seen it. That night they remained in the archive room until after midnight, comparing Edmund's letters with supply records. For several hours they stopped being enemies. Honora found an old note. She smiled despite herself. What? Edmund hated cards. Gideon looked over. He cheated. He was terrible at cheating. He was terrible at losing. Honora looked at him. You remember? Gideon's voice quieted. Everything. He told her Edmund wrote home every Sunday, polished his boots badly, and once argued with a colonel for 20 minutes over whether a mule outranked a junior lieutenant in usefulness. Honora laughed before she could stop herself. It was the first time Edmund had felt alive in 7 years. Not a portrait. Not a grave. a brother. Then Honora noticed another paper half hidden beneath Gideon's hand. The date was 6 months before their marriage. She read the first line. A union with Bellamy's daughter may force him to reveal where his loyalties truly lie. Her smile disappeared. Gideon saw where she was looking. Too late. Honora took the letter. You knew. He stood. Honora, you knew my father might use me. Yes. And you married me anyway. Yes. She stared at him. My father sent me here as a weapon. Gideon said nothing. And you married me because you wanted to see where he would aim. His silence confirmed it. Whatever fragile trust had formed between them broke cleanly. Honora placed the paper back on the table. Do not follow me. This time he obeyed. Colonel Harcourt disappeared the next morning. His room was empty. His coat was gone. So were his papers. A footman remembered seeing him leave after receiving a letter shortly before dawn. No one had seen the letter. Gideon immediately ordered inquiries made along the North Road. Honora watched him give instructions. How convenient. He turned. What? The one man who says Edmund concealed something disappears before he can explain it. Gideon's expression hardened. You believe I removed him? I no longer know what you are capable of. The words landed. He dismissed the servants, then said quietly, that makes 2 of us. Julian arrived that night, not through the main entrance, through the servants' courtyard, muddy, breathless, and furious. Honora barely recognized him. What happened? He pulled a sealed packet from beneath his coat. Father has been searching Edmund's old rooms. Gideon stepped forward. Julian looked at him with open hostility. I did not come for you. Honora took the packet. What is this? I found it behind the panel in Edmund's writing desk. The seal bore Edmund's initials. Honora's fingers trembled. Father never saw it? I do not think so. Gideon said, open it. Honora looked at him, then at Julian, then broke the seal. The first sentence stopped her breathing. If I die, Gideon Ashcombe must never learn what my father and I have done. Silence filled the room. Gideon moved toward her. Honora stepped back. No. His face had gone pale. I need to see that. No. For once, the Duke of Redwick looked genuinely unprepared. Honora read on. Edmund admitted he had discovered irregularities in military accounts. At first he had concealed them. Not for money. For the Bellamy name. He had altered dates. Suppressed one report. Persuaded a junior officer not to ask questions. Then men began going without supplies. Illness spread. Horses failed. A retreat became more dangerous than it should have been. Edmund had tried to stop what he had helped hide. The words blurred beneath Honora's tears. Her brother had not been innocent. Her father had not been alone. And Gideon had never known. She turned the final sheet. Nothing. The memorandum ended in the middle of a sentence. Honora looked at Julian. Where is the rest? Julian's face changed. There was another page. Where? He swallowed. Father has it. Gideon's eyes sharpened. How do you know? Because I saw him reading it. Honora's grip tightened around Edmund's confession. What was on it? Julian shook his head. I could not see. Then he looked at his sister. But after he read it, Father burned every letter from Edmund he could find. And somewhere inside Bellamy House, the final page still held the answer to the question that had destroyed all of them. What truly happened to Edmund? Honora returned to Bellamy House alone. Gideon had offered to accompany her. She refused. For once, neither man would decide how she entered her father's house. The carriage stopped beneath the stone portico shortly after noon. A footman opened the door, and for one strange moment, Honora remembered coming down those same steps on her wedding morning. Then she had carried her father's instructions. Now she carried Edmund's confession. Lord Bellamy was waiting in the library. He did not look surprised. You should have stayed at Redwick. Honora closed the door behind her. You should have told me the truth 7 years ago. His expression barely moved. About which part? That answer told her everything. She placed Edmund's memorandum on the desk. Her father looked at it once, then away. Julian gave you that. Yes. He is young. He is frightened of becoming you. Bellamy's jaw tightened. Honora had never spoken to him that way. Perhaps that was why he finally looked at her, not as a daughter, but as an opponent. You believe Redwick now? No. That surprised him. Honora stepped closer. I believe evidence. She opened Edmund's memorandum. He admitted helping you conceal military accounts. Her father said nothing. He altered dates, suppressed a report, persuaded another officer to remain silent. He was protecting this family. Men suffered. Edmund did not know how far matters had gone. And you did? Bellamy's restraint cracked. Do you imagine government contracts are clean things? Do you imagine great estates, ministries, merchants and gentlemen survive by behaving like parish saints? Honora stared at him. There were arrangements. Arrangements? Commissions. Favors. Percentages. Men were rewarded. Positions were maintained. That is how influence works. And when food never reached soldiers? That was never my intention. But it happened. Bellamy looked away. For the first time, Honora saw something beneath the pride. Not remorse. Fear. She whispered, Edmund turned against you. Her father's face hardened. He lost perspective. He found conscience. He would have destroyed us. Honora almost recoiled. There it is. What? The thing you loved more than your son. Bellamy rose. I built a name you children were meant to inherit. You built a prison and taught us to call it inheritance. The silence after that seemed to alter the room itself. Her father went to the cabinet beside the fireplace. Honora watched him unlock it. He removed one folded sheet, Edmund's handwriting, the missing page. Bellamy held it, but did not give it to her. Once you read this, you cannot return to the story you have preferred. Honora's throat tightened. I stopped preferring stories the night I married Gideon. He handed it over. She read. Slowly. Then again. Edmund had discovered that the supply fraud reached far beyond their father. He had gathered names, dates, payments, enough to destroy several powerful men. He intended to carry the evidence personally to a senior officer outside the contracting network. Gideon had opposed the plan. They argued. Edmund insisted. The final lines were painfully simple. I began this cowardice by protecting our name. I mean to end it by risking my own. Honora stopped reading. There was no accusation that Bellamy had ordered his death. No confession that Gideon had abandoned him. Only Edmund's choice. He volunteered, Honora whispered. Bellamy said nothing. Gideon tried to stop him. He allowed him to go. Honora looked up sharply. There, that is what you did. Her father's voice rose. What? You took Gideon's guilt and turned it into guilt for Edmund's death. He commanded him. Edmund chose. He was my son, and he was a man. Bellamy stared at her. Honora folded the page. For 7 years you made me hate Gideon, because it was easier than allowing me to understand Edmund. I protected you. No. Her voice was almost gentle now. You protected yourself. Gideon was waiting when Honora returned to Redwick. He stood in the entrance hall but did not approach her. Honora held up the missing page. I know. Something passed across his face. Not relief. Dread. He volunteered, she said. Gideon looked toward the floor. I told him not to go. But you permitted it. Yes. Why? He was an officer. That is not the answer. Gideon closed his eyes briefly. Because he was right. Honora waited. He had helped conceal the accounts. He believed he had to carry the evidence himself. You could have ordered him not to. Yes. Why didn't you? Gideon looked at her. Because I knew that if I did, he He would spend the rest of his life believing I had allowed him to escape the consequences of what he had done. Honora's anger softened into something more painful. And when he died, I decided I had killed him. No, I know that now. He said it without defense. But I did not know it then. Honora finally understood. Every ruined politician, every threat, every private file, every act of vengeance. Gideon had not only been punishing corrupt men, he had been punishing himself through them. You could not hurt yourself enough, she said quietly, so you hurt everyone who reminded you of him. Gideon did not deny it. Lord Bellamy moved first. Within days, letters reached London. Honora had been manipulated by her husband. The Duke of Redwick had become obsessed with old military grievances. His wife, isolated at Redwick, had been turned against her family. Several influential men repeated the claims. Too many of their names appeared in Edmund's records. A formal inquiry followed, and Bellamy entered it smiling. He believed he understood every weakness Gideon possessed. He was wrong about one. Gideon no longer intended to hide his own sins. The hearing was crowded. Peers, legal representatives, former officers, government men, families whose reputations might collapse before the afternoon ended. Lord Bellamy spoke first. He was calm, measured, reasonable. He described Gideon as a man consumed by vengeance. Then his allies presented evidence of Gideon's conduct. Private letters obtained through pressure. Political careers deliberately destroyed. Personal scandals weaponized. Threats. Financial coercion. Whispers filled the chamber. Honora watched Gideon carefully. This was the moment he could have defended everything. Instead, he rose. The accusations concerning my conduct are substantially true. The room went still. Bellamy turned sharply. Gideon continued. I used private wrongdoing to punish men for public crimes I could not prove. Murmurs spread. I told myself their guilt made my methods righteous. He looked toward Honora. It did not. Lord Bellamy's face changed. His strongest weapon had just been taken from him. Gideon sat. Then Honora stood. Her father looked at her. Honora. She ignored him. She placed Edmund's memorandum before the inquiry. My brother was not innocent. The words shocked the room more than any accusation against Bellamy could have. Lord Bellamy went white. Honora continued. Edmund Bellamy initially helped conceal irregularities in military supply records. Julian, seated behind her, lowered his head. Honora's chest tightened. She wanted to protect Edmund. Every instinct she had been raised with demanded it. But she read his confession anyway. The altered dates. The suppressed report. The silence. Then she read the missing page. Edmund's decision to expose what he had helped conceal. His final mission. His death. When Honora finished, Bellamy whispered, "You have destroyed your brother's name." She looked at him. "No," her voice carried through the chamber. "I have returned it to him." Her father stared. He was not a perfect man murdered inside a perfect story. He was a man who did something wrong, understood it, and chose to correct it, though it cost him everything. She closed the memorandum. That is more honorable than the lie we built around him. No one spoke. Then the doors opened. Colonel Harcourt entered. Honora turned so quickly her chair scraped the floor. Gideon stood. Harcourt looked exhausted, but alive. Lord Bellamy's face lost all color. Harcourt carried a leather case. "I apologize for my delay," Gideon said. "Where have you been?" "Portsmouth, then London." He placed the case before the inquiry. "Men acting for several gentlemen represented here suggested that I leave England." A stir moved through the chamber. I allowed them to think I intended to. He opened the case. Inside were quartermaster records. Originals. The army copies were altered. These were not. Names. Payments. Delivery quantities. Missing stores. Signatures. The evidence matched Edmund's memorandum. Bellamy's conspiracy did not collapse dramatically. It collapsed line by line. That was worse. One gentleman denied his signature. Another demanded adjournment. A third left the chamber before proceedings ended. Lord Bellamy remained seated. His influence, carefully accumulated over decades, disappeared around him. There were prosecutions, resignations, investigations. Lord Bellamy lost his appointments, and nearly every political ally who had once crowded his table. Julian remained with him long enough to settle family matters, then assumed responsibilities his father could no longer control. Gideon was investigated as well. He did not resist. Some men he had harmed received restitution. Others received public acknowledgement that his methods had exceeded his authority. And Honora did not return immediately to Redwick. She spent several months away. Not with her father, not with Gideon. For the first time in her life, she belonged nowhere because someone had commanded it. When winter came, she heard that Gideon had destroyed most of the private files he had spent years collecting. He had reopened petitions previously dismissed. He had established a formal review of estate decisions so no steward, and no duke, could rule simply because no one dared question him. He never wrote asking her to return. That mattered. So in early spring, Honora went back. By choice. Gideon was in the same private chamber where their marriage had begun. The same desk. The same dispatch case. The same window. But Honora carried nothing. No forged letters. No instructions. No secrets beneath her gown. Gideon looked up. For several seconds neither moved. Then he said, "Has someone sent you to destroy me again?" Honora almost smiled. "No." He waited. "No one sent me at all." Something in his face changed. He stood. "I will not ask you to stay. I know. I do not deserve obedience." "No." He almost flinched. Honora came closer. "And I will never give it to you." Gideon looked at her. "What will you give me?" "The truth." He let out a quiet breath. "That may be worse. It often is." For the first time, the faintest trace of warmth touched his expression. Then it vanished. "I loved Edmund because he told me when I was wrong," Gideon said. "I think perhaps that is why I feared loving you." Honora said nothing. "You learned the worst thing about me," he continued, "and you did not excuse it merely because you came to understand me." His voice lowered. "No one has ever given me anything more difficult than that." Honora looked around the room where she had once come, intending to destroy him. "I stayed the first time because my father sent me." She stepped closer. "I returned because he cannot." Gideon's eyes closed briefly. When he opened them, he was no longer looking at her like a duke measuring danger, only like a man who had finally been offered something he could not seize. Choice. Honora placed her hand in his. Their marriage had begun with obedience. Then came betrayal. Then truth. And only after all three had failed them did they understand what loyalty was supposed to be. Honora had once believed betrayal was the opposite of love. In the end, she learned something far harder. Sometimes the deepest betrayal was protecting the people we loved from the truth they most needed to face.